Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. It's Sunday, the 20th of July, 2025. Today is day 653. On Sundays, I like to do a short devotion, and I've been thinking this week about something that an international Christian leader said to me when I met with them this week. We were talking about the current U.S. administration, particularly the Trump administration. And this Christian leader quoted the verses to me specifically that talk about Christians who serve two masters. And so he was talking about the Christian support of the current Trump administration. And I just want to talk about that for a minute. And I want to talk about that as it relates specifically to the Middle East and the ongoing war in the Middle East. So the verse that was quoted to me is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 24. And this Christian leader said to me, "No one can serve two masters." And he was referring to this verse in Matthew chapter 6. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and you will despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And I think in a lot of ways that verse is quite profound for this moment in the U.S. context and the binary and the divisions over our political situation. In other words, the question I've been reflecting on today is, what does it mean to love God in this moment more than our political convictions or passions or self-interest, more than money, more than politics, more than power? What does that mean? What is no one can serve two masters? What does it mean to be faithful to God in this moment, particularly as there is a genocide that continues each and every day in Gaza? I've been thinking about that a lot. What does it mean to be loyal to God, not to our passions, our convictions, and our personal self-interest? There are numerous Bible verses that talk about our fidelity to God. They talk about what it's supposed to look like, how we're supposed to abide in God and not to depend on the things of this world. John 18:36 says, and this is Jesus himself saying, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders, but now my kingdom is from another place." The things of God are different than the things of this world, and we're to be loyal to one and not the other. The book of Joshua in the Hebrew scriptures tells us about how the ancient Israelites were forced with this question. Who would they serve? Joshua 24:15 says, "If it's evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve. Whether it is the gods that your father served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." 1 John 3:24 says, "Whoever keeps his commandments abides in God, and God in him. And by this we know that he abides in us by the Holy Spirit whom he has given us." I love, that's one of my favorite passages. And when I was studying Greek in seminary, the word in Greek for abide is mene, to abide in God, that God says he will abide in us. We are to be differentiated as followers of Christ from the actions of this world that are self-centered, that are power-centered, that are money-centered. We should live self-sacrificial lives, willing to pay the cost on behalf of the poor and the oppressed as a witness of the love of God for his creation and for the world. And today, many U.S. Christians, especially conservative Christians, fundamentalists sometimes, particularly members of the Republican Party, have supported President Trump for a variety of reasons. And I wanted to talk a little bit about those motivations and just keep in mind those verses that says no one can serve two masters. The motivations may differ depending on theological, cultural, or political priorities. Here are some of the common reasons Christians support President Trump. You might have heard of single issue politics. Many conservative Christians vote on one issue or two primary issues, abortion and the death penalty, for example. President Trump's influence over the Supreme Court appointments has been a major factor in why Christians voted for him. Many conservative Christians supported Trump for his appointment of justices who they believed would uphold these values of pro-life and others like religious liberty. And I want to take just a minute and talk about the three appointees for the Supreme Court during Trump's first term. And this has profound impacts on the Middle East. You might think, how so? It's the judicial branch, not the executive or the legislative. But following the 2016 presidential election, after President Trump took office in January 2017, there was an immediate vacancy from Scalia, who was a Supreme Court. He died in February of 2016. So there was immediately a vacancy that needed to be fulfilled. After taking office, Trump nominated Neil Gorsuch to succeed Scalia, and he was confirmed in April of 2017. There were 5 additional names added to the previous list of nominees in November 2017. In June 18, Associate Justice Anthony Kennedy announced his retirement, creating a second vacancy on the Supreme Court. Then that's when Brett Kavanaugh was replaced and placed on the court. And then Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away in 2020. And that's when Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett as a replacement in 2020. So 3 different Supreme Court justices were changed during the course of President Trump's first term: Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. Their confirmations enabled, partially because there was a rule change prior to this. It was that you had to have a majority. It's called a nuclear option, where Supreme Court nominees had to be advanced by not only a simple majority, but a supermajority vote. And that law was changed, which allowed these 3 conservative judges to be placed on the bench. You're probably like, May, what are you going on and on and on about? I'm sorry, but these 3 conservative judges, how does this relate to the Middle East? Several of them supported President Trump's travel ban against Muslims during his first term, for example. One of the concerns is that very soon there could be court cases that are heard on anti-boycott laws. The number one, when we talk about the Bill of Rights, the freedom of speech allows for people to make choices based on differences of beliefs. This is one of the fundamental freedoms of the American democracy. And anti-boycott laws seek to make it illegal to boycott the state of Israel. It's not yet before the Supreme Court, but federal and state courts have heard multiple cases related to laws and entities that are losing privileges because they are choosing to boycott Israel. This is a part of the whole boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, okay? An example is the Amawi Pflugerville. This is a Texas case where a speech pathologist challenged a Texas law that required all state contractors to pledge not to boycott Israel. How is that not a violation of freedom of speech and freedom of thinking and freedom of action? The ruling, a federal judge initially ruled that the law violated the First Amendment, but these cases raised constitutional questions about free speech versus state anti-BDS laws, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. If appeals continue, one of these cases may very well make it to the Supreme Court. These 3 conservative judges also have significant impact on terrorism and liability lawsuits. Initially, the Supreme Court would not hear cases about deaths in Israel and Palestine, for example. So U.S. citizens who are injured or killed in attacks in Israel and the Palestinian territories have sued foreign banks and organizations under laws like the Anti-Terrorism Act. An example is Sokolow versus the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Families of U.S. citizens killed in attacks sued the PLO and the Palestinian Authority. The outcome was that the Supreme Court declined to review the case after a lower court dismissed it for lack of jurisdiction. Okay, this was people who were killed by terrorist attacks, Palestinian terrorist attacks, in Israel between 2001 and 2004. This was during the Second Intifada. The claim under the Anti-Terrorism Act was that the family should receive damages from the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Palestinian Authority. The outcome was that the jury awarded more than $650 million to victims in 2015. But then the Second Court of Appeals reversed the judgment in 2016, saying the courts lacked personal jurisdiction, and the Supreme Court declined to hear this appeal in 2018. This is so significant because it shows the difficulty of suing U.S. courts in holding foreign actors accountable for violence in the Middle East. But listen, you need to listen to what happens, because this just changed literally this year in June. In June 2025, the Supreme Court heard and decided the case of Fuld, F-U-L-D, versus the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And they ruled that promoting security and justice for victims of terrorism act, the PSJVTA, how's that for an acronym, did not violate the Fifth Amendment due process clause, which then allows lawsuits by U.S. victims of overseas terrorist attacks to be pursued in U.S. courts against the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Palestinian Authority. That was just decided last month in the U.S. Supreme Court. It was a unanimous ruling authored by Chief Justice John Roberts, affirming that the PSJVTA's jurisdictional provisions are constitutional. Now, did this turn the Sokolow versus PLO? No, but it does undermine the legal basis on which Sokolow's case was dismissed, which opens the doors for other lawsuits to proceed. This is so significant. And part of what's so significant is we've seen just in the last 2 weeks, Palestinian American citizens who are killed by the Israeli government, and that law has not yet been applied. So does this apply to all U.S. citizens killed by foreign countries, or does it only apply to the Palestinians? That's a question that will be determined in the U.S. court system in the months and years to come. So all of that, those are reasons why conservatives have voted for President Trump, and the implications of the Supreme Court, the people that he's put on the Supreme Court. Okay, so why have conservative Christians voted for President Trump? The Supreme Court is a major one. Voting on single issues is another one. Religious freedom. Supporters often have appreciated Trump's executive actions and rhetoric about religious expression in public life. Prayer in schools, for example. In today's political climate, sometimes religious freedom means Christian liberty. The idea of privileging and protecting Christian rights in the practice of our religion, and not necessarily providing equal protections afforded to other faith traditions like Islam or Judaism or Buddhism and such. Another reason people voted for Trump is his pro-life stance. I won't go into all kinds of details about that, but it resonated with evangelical and Catholic pro-life voters. If you're interested in that topic, I refer you to a book that just came out. I edited it. It's called Abortion Abolition: Beyond Pro-Choice and Pro-Life Politics. Another reason, of course, that conservatives and Christians have voted for President Trump is his support for Israel. His administration's policies, particularly during the first term, such as moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, have aligned with the views of many evangelical Christians who see support for Israel as biblically important. A lot of evangelicals think that you can't honor God unless you support the modern nation state of Israel, instead of differentiating between the Jewish people of the scriptures and the Jewish people today and the modern nation state, which is a secular state that was formed by the Jewish nationalist movement. But this was exemplified, the support for Israel during President Trump's first term, and it's yet to see how his support for Israel might play out this term. A lot of it has to do with whether or not Netanyahu will acquiesce and allow there to be an end to the war on Gaza. Cultural conservatism and also opposition to establishment politics are other reasons that Christians have voted for Trump. Many have been disillusioned with mainstream politics, and they saw Trump as a disruptive force against a system that they felt ignored their values. A lot of that resonates with conservative Christians and Christian values, family values, and such. There are many, many reasons and many, many critiques. I'll let you find them on your own for all the reasons Christians should not have supported for President Trump. But I wanted us to talk about this today in light of that verse. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. In light of that verse, that no person can serve two masters. So all of that to say, regardless of your political persuasion, if you're a fiscal conservative, if you're an independent, if you're Republican or Democrat, or wherever you may live in the world, the scriptures are clear that we should be loyal to God and not to any man, woman, or human being. We should not be loyal to things of this earth more than we are loyal to God. In the scriptures, that verse, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, it appears in 3 of the 4 gospels. And what's that mean? It means give to the political establishments of the day what is theirs, and give to God what is God's. Jesus said, give back to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. And he's emphasizing the spiritual devotion and allegiance that first and foremost should go to God. We can fulfill our civic duties, pay taxes, respect authority, but we have to recognize the primacy of spiritual devotion and allegiance to the God of heaven. I found this in a commentary online. It was called Got Questions, and I thought it was actually quite a great description of this passage. It's talking about Matthew 22, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, where Jesus had returned from Jerusalem for the first time. It gives the whole context of that verse. So Jesus returned to Jerusalem, and he just finished sharing parables with the crowd. He was teaching, and his enemies saw this as a chance to trap him. And they asked him, tell us then what you think. Should we not pay taxes to Caesar? Should we or should we not? Now, this was a trick question where the political authorities of the day, which included religious authorities, were trying to catch Jesus. If Jesus said no, the Herodians would charge him with treason against Rome. If Jesus said yes, the Pharisees would accuse him of being disloyal to the Jewish people and to the laws of God, and he would lose support from everyone who was there. Pay taxes or don't pay taxes? This was the question. It's a catch-22. And Jesus's response, it really was brilliant. He was aware of what was happening, of the malice that was out to get him, of the intent behind their question. Why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me a coin for the tax. And they brought him the denarius, which had the picture of Caesar on it. It was made of silver and had an image of the emperor. And on the coin, it actually said divine. The Jews considered this idolatry, which is forbidden by the second commandment. And it was another reason why if Jesus said yes, he would be in trouble, according to the Jewish faith tradition. So his acceptance of tax as lawful would have been rejecting the second commandment and casting doubt on his claims about being the Son of God. So when the coin was displayed in front of him, Jesus said, whose likeness is this? The answer was obviously Caesar's. Therefore, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God. Upon hearing this, the enemies of Jesus marveled and went away. By making this declaration, Jesus is drawing a sharp distinction between two kingdoms. The kingdom of this world that Caesar holds power over, and maybe Trump holds power over it in this moment. But there's another kingdom that is not of this world. If Caesar demands money, give it, for it is only mammon. But make sure you give to God that which he asks of us. Caesar minted coins and demanded the coins in return, but God, according to this commentary, and I believe it to be true, minted the human soul. He knew you before you were even created in your mother's womb. He has stamped his image on everyone. We're made in Imago Dei, the image of God. So give to Caesar, Trump, the politicians of this world who are seeking power and money and temporary things. Give them whatever it means to be obedient to the laws of this day. But the laws of God have a higher privilege. Offer yourself to God, who has brought our souls from death to life. Might we offer ourselves to him as an instrument of righteousness, as Romans 6:13 says. I'll close with words that came from the Vatican in the past couple of days. His Holiness Pope Leo made an appeal, and I feel like this is an appeal to honor the things of God. God is a God of peace. His Holiness Pope Leo XIV expressed his deep sorrow over the recent Israeli attacks on the Catholic parish in Gaza and called for an immediate halt for the barbarity to stop in the Gaza Strip. This is the Catholic Church that was just attacked this past week, where 600 Gazans have been sheltering there. 3 people were killed during that attack. I'd encourage you to read Churches from Elise Peace's statement about it. The priest, Gabriele Romanelli, was injured. So speaking this past Sunday after reciting the Angelus prayer at his summer residence, the Pope named 3 victims, Saad Isa Kastani Salame, Fumia Isa Latif Ayad, Najwa Ibrahim Latif Abu Dawood. These were the victims of the attack on the church, and His Holiness said he was close to them and their families. Pope Leo stressed that the attack was just another one of the continuous military attacks against the civilian population and places of worship in the Gaza Strip. The Pope appealed for an immediate halt to the barbarity of war and for a peaceful resolution to this conflict. He urged the international community to observe humanitarian law and to respect the obligation to protect civilians, as well as the prohibition against collective punishment, indiscriminate use of force, and forced displacement of the population. Pope Leo brought his appeal to a close with a message to our beloved Christian communities in the Middle East. They felt they could do little in the face of this tragic situation. And he said this, "You are in the heart of the Pope and the whole church. And thank you for your witness of faith." My close from Deuteronomy 7:9. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, and meant serving the least of these, seeking to end all oppression and violence. May it be so in the name of the Lord of the universe, the King of kings, the Lord of lords, the Prince of Peace, in the name of Christ. Amen.